Hello, welcome to Universities UK Innovation and Growth webcast. My name is Greg Wade. I'm joined by
Michael Wood. I'm the NHS Local Growth Advisor at the NHS Confederation.
Good to see you, Michael. We have a single topic for the discussion today, and it is STPs, which I must confess I know very little about. We were at the most recent HEFCE New Forms of Funding presentation, and you helpfully introduced members of the HC sector to what STPs are, and we thought it would be a good idea to go into more depth and explain a bit more how they might be relevant to universities and how universities might get involved.
Absolutely.
If that's okay with you?
Absolutely, Greg, and I think we'll come on to why it's a good time actually to talk about these.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, STPs, it's another NHS acronym for the university sector to get to know.
Yeah.
It stands for Sustainability and Transformation Plans.
Okay.
So the keys in the word sustainability, first and foremost, followed by transformation. We hope STP plans include both. We'll wait and see as we go along. In a nutshell, these are your new regional approach to the future of health and care.
Okay.
So there are 44 regional footprints now in England, each of which will be developing a sustainability and transformation plan which will map out its approach to health and care across the next 5 years.
Right.
So really this is the first time that we have a multi-year place-based approach in health and care. So this isn't about what one institution thinks. It is a coming together of all the health and care leaders across that footprint to come up with and to look at the data and have a shared vision for the provision of health and care across the footprint.
Okay. Just on that, do you have an example of like almost a head count of how many leaders that brings together in one area? Because it should be quite a lot, isn't it?
It will. So if you think there's 44 plans, 44 footprints in England, 5 in London, so that's 39 across the rest of the country. If you think about the population size of that, again, far greater than what we have when we look at our institutional plans. If you look at the number of NHS trusts, of commissioners, of mental health providers, primary care, community care, this is a huge undertaking. And and what's interesting is that the footprints are often, there's 44 of them. The majority of the leaders are from the NHS, but there's 4 footprints where the leaders are actually from local authorities.
Okay.
So 3 of them have chief executives of local authorities in charge. That's Birmingham and Solihull, Greater Manchester and Coventry. And then Nottingham is being led by a Director of Adult Social Services.
Right.
The rest of them are led by acute trust chief execs from the NHS or CCG accountable officers. Now, there's a few issues which we'll come on to here, but really, so that is one person who is leading the planning in their region. They are not elected to be the leader. It was a quite complicated bottom-up, top-down approach, but they, so they are first amongst equals in that sense that they're not elected. But they're tasked with bringing together all those leaders we spoke about, which ranges in the numbers, ranges well into, over a dozen, it ranges a really complex number there, together to try and in quite a short time scale really to try and map out the challenges and how they seek to address them.
And it's bringing together a whole range of organisations that universities will connect with in many different ways, but also universities usually have very strong local links to their local hospitals, if not across the road from their local hospitals and care providers.
Absolutely. So, we can look at some of the areas where I think there might be most relevance for universities.
Yes.
And
lead us through the themes of the STPs that you think are most
absolutely.
relevant.
One of the first things I would say, and this was the topic for discussion at the meeting in which it came up, capital investment. So if we're looking at trying to reconfigure and redesign how we provide health and care services across a region, the bricks and mortar is critical to that. And so every STP plan will have focus on estates and facilities, and that will probably be a bit of precursor to a serious in-depth piece of work about what they're going to do about that. So I was looking through the first STP that was published in draft form, which is Birmingham and Solihull a few weeks ago, and they talk about over 600 buildings across the city which fall under the health and care sectors, and which will form the basis for their plans. So I think if we're looking at local capital planning, that shouldn't just be across health and care. I'm sure universities have their own plans. Combined authorities will be bringing together regional plans. What was positive in the Birmingham example was a reference that they would, within 12 months, seek to be working with the combined authority on those capital plans. Yeah. They also mentioned working with one public estate, which came up as one of the good financing options at the summit. So we have capital finance and how important that is to the design of health and care. I think, and this is the ambition of the plans, another area to look at is the workforce. Yeah. So if you're trying to, again, picture the future of a modern, fit-for-purpose health and care sector locally, how are we providing the care, in what buildings, and how is our workforce designed and built to do that? So clear role there for colleges and universities to work with health and care leaders to try and understand the future clinical roles going forward, to get more local people into the sector, and to continue working to attract the brightest and the best to a region, which I know is a joint mission. Yeah. So I think real challenges around the workforce, and again, every STP will have a focus on the workforce, and there will be a programme, of activity underpinning what's being published at the moment, which really goes into some detail, and we'll come on to that. Some other areas, for example, obviously the provision of health and care services is integral to this, and I would expect, you mentioned hospitals and parts of the service which have long-standing and positive relationships with the universities, which really help, the growth, and really help the expertise and the excellence of that region to have a focus on this. Yeah. So this isn't about, untangling relationships. This is about building relationships. And if you are working in partnership to make your area, your region, the best provider of X, or the best specialist, the place to go for Y, then actually that should be, in my view, the basis for partnership working. Rather than starting in different places. Yeah. Another area I would say is, it may be confusing for university colleagues who might be working with local NHS organisations who are undertaking new models of integration. So we have what are called vanguards. Right. Vanguards in the NHS at the moment, which are new sites which are really experimenting in real time with horizontal or vertical integration. Between secondary care and social care. It could be primary care, secondary care. It could be horizontal or vertical integration. So it might be that the universities are working with vanguards locally on the evaluation or on some of the different forms of new provision of services. Vanguards will be an important part of STPs. This isn't something new in the NHS coming and, as often happens, taking over something else that was new a few years ago and was important. Vanguards will be key parts of regional footprints, and this will be how to actually utilise them at this more strategic level.
Okay, so you imagine STPs will sort of take an overview of the vanguards in their area?
Absolutely.
And look how they can integrate them into the proposals.
Absolutely. Okay. It's really important, and I'm sure some of your universities have looked at and trying to understand an STP. Yeah. They might be familiar with some of the discussions, or at least have an understanding of who's leading in their region. I think it's really important to look at some of the issues and the challenges which are there, and these are absolutely, these are very real challenges. Yes. This isn't an easy process.
No. Okay. Run us through some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. The starting point Really important for universities who'll be working quite closely to influence combined authority plans,
Yes.
which are statutory. STPs are non-statutory. The Health Service probably has a bit of an aversion to legislation following on from the Health and Social Care Act, which was hugely complicated.
Yes.
So non-statutory plans, that can often lead to difficulties in terms of, is this something I have to do?
Yeah.
But I can reassure university colleagues that this is the only game in town for the NHS, really.
Okay.
But I think what might be a challenge is where STPs come up against statutory plans.
Yeah.
Maybe that lack of an underpinning is an issue there. I think we've seen, and it'd be interesting to get the perception of university colleagues, a cloak of secrecy. I think we've seen some STPs shrouded in. And I think, tackling this issue, because it's a huge issue, I see this both ways. So local leaders of health and care services were told, think big.
Yeah.
Think transformational. Think not what was right for the 20th century, what's right going forward. Yes, this will include reconfiguration, redesign of services. Yes, that might well include some institutions.
Yeah.
Being downsized, being moved, having services shut.
Highly sensitive topics.
Highly sensitive topics. So the NHS essentially didn't want to set hairs running. But having said that, of course, these are highly sensitive topics.
Yeah.
And if you want to transform services, you have to be open, and you have to focus on good engagement.
Yeah.
And you have to have trust there.
Okay.
And so some colleagues will have they'll have noticed their STP has been published in draft form because it's on the front page of the paper.
Right.
And if you're not on the front foot in terms of sharing information, it's very easy to for the media to take something and to start shaping that narrative.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite difficult in some parts of the country now to actually get back on the front foot and start explaining why we're thinking about these plans, explaining what the future is, and explaining what's right for local populations.
Yeah.
Because we've already, it's already been on the front page of the paper. We've already had those difficulties.
Do you think in some places where given this desire for secrecy, driven by understandable reasons, that some local players like universities or local authorities might have felt excluded?
I think if if the first time you hear about something's front page of the paper, it might be slightly odd. I think because the nature of the NHS from the centre, trying to talk about how to stimulate local planning, it's still a very centralised service, the NHS. Yeah. So some colleagues would have waited for the centre to give them the green light rather than having that local based discussion about what's right here. Yeah. I mean, what's really interesting is the first few STPs that were published, they've only been published in the last 2 weeks, were published by STPs led by council colleagues. So there is that inherent cultural disconnect between local authorities, for whom direct democracy and engagement is much more important and a much more integral part of what they do to the NHS, which often has quite a legalistic view of consultations. Yeah. So what I would say was, if universities feel that something's been cooked up behind closed doors, many people in the NHS, many local authority chief executives, haven't been involved in this process.
Right. So they're not alone.
They're not alone. The timetable has been incredibly truncated to date. The reason why we're talking today, Greg, is that all draft plans for the 44 had to be submitted by mid to late October. Okay. So they've only been submitted in less than a month. Yeah. And a few have been released in draft form already. Yeah. Okay. So
they're important. They're relevant to universities. Yeah. And I guess there's a question about how can universities get engaged, and what's the forward timescale?
So with one of the interesting documents NHS England published in September, and we can circulate the links.
Yes, we will.
Greg, was actually some guidance to STPs on the engagement. Yeah. I think they recognise centrally engagement will be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think locally we absolutely recognise it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
It's already cropped up in local by-elections.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, not far, if we go into West
Yeah.
London, it's certainly come
Indeed.
up on the doorstep and has been used
Yes.
by political sides. So, we absolutely understand and are thinking about the engagement in a different way.
Yeah.
Now, this will all be done locally. We
Mm-hmm.
cannot sit here and command how STPs should engage locally.
Yeah.
But what I would say is, we will be challenging them
Yeah.
at the NHS Confederation, supporting colleagues to try
Mhm.
and understand how to arrive at a position where you have that fit for purpose, purpose modern
Yeah.
health and care sector. Where I know the LGA will as well. I know
Yeah.
colleagues across health and social care will be really understanding that actually there's a whole range of partners who play a part in this. And I think one of my real hopes is that STPs move away from what's right for the NHS to what's right for population healthcare.
Yeah.
If you focus on the NHS, then actually you exclude many local colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
If you focus on the determinants of healthcare, you include many colleagues you may not immediately think about, people around the table locally.
Okay.
So I think, there's 44, there's going to be a range, there's going to be somewhere primary care, mental health, community
Mhm.
health, public health are really engaged. There's going to be somewhere those communities are saying, well, where is your commitment to the population health? There's going
Yeah.
to be somewhere the councils play an equal role in
Yeah.
this, which I would absolutely support. There's somewhere some councils are going to say, actually, I'm not entirely satisfied with this. It's about a process which is critical, I think, looking forward, and it really is about moving from system-based to place-based.
Okay.
I think that's my wish really, is that these plans, when they come out, are not system-based in a locality. They are truly place-based.
Okay.
And this is an inclusive piece of work which helps colleagues in and outside of the service and outside of social care understand what our challenges are and what we see the vision to be.
Well, I think that's a very helpful aspiration. Certainly, universities alongside other local players will have a role in that, and I think certainly UK would be very happy to work with you to encourage our members to engage and help point them in the right direction.
And I think where that's really important, actually, Greg, just coming on the issue, is one issue which I think we're going to be struck by when the drafts start coming out, and is the gap between ambition and reality.
Yeah.
Now, this could be just in areas like estates, but actually, it could be cutting right through the process. Where do we want to get to, and and actually, what is likely, given some of these issues? So, and given that our health and care leaders are doing this on top of the day job.
Yes.
Given that there are perceptions that some of these plans are about the local acute rather than about population health, given that money is tight, given that governance arrangements, because the bodies aren't statutory, are not not what the governance will be in a statutory organisation.
Yes. Yeah.
So that might be one of the differences in working between combined authorities and working with STPs, your members. But I'm clear that if we're to make a success of local places, then actually it's all our job, it's all our duties. And it isn't just about making a success of an NHS institution, it's about increasing population health.
Yeah. Well, excellent. Was there any, I think that's been a really helpful introduction to STPs, a sort of invitation of the sector to engage, and we can build on that. And we'll certainly provide a link underneath this YouTube video to the document that you mentioned. Is there anything else you want to say or finish on?
I think I'd just like to say, so there's a few documents which we'll put links to.
Yeah.
So the Confederation, along with some NHS colleagues and the LGA, have done a briefing on understanding sustainability transformation plans. The King's Fund, one of the leading health think tanks,
Yeah.
has just published this week a really in-depth report
Yeah.
looking at the process, the background, some of the
Right.
challenges, some of the issues
Yeah.
with first-hand recollections. And we've seen around about 18 of the 44 published in draft form.
Right.
So I think it's really the onus is on universities to try and understand whether their local one has been published as
Yeah.
yet. Have a read of it. It's your window into health and care.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important. See it as a window into health and care.
Yeah.
They're not the finished articles yet. They've been submitted in draft,
Yeah.
and these are 5-year plans. And I think it's really now is the time, especially given the focus on engagement which health and care leaders will have in the coming months, to bang your fist on the table.
Yeah. And it's not just about clinical areas or research. It's about local community engagement, about the importance of place and the role of organisations as anchor institutions. So it's strategic as well as specific.
Absolutely, and I think that's going to be the challenge on top of our day jobs.
Yes.
Having the time and the headspace and the partnerships and relationships to map out that strategic vision, which encompasses, how we bring benefits to our communities.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Michael. Good to talk to you, and I'm sure there'll be enough interest and enough information in this area for us to record another interview at some point in the future.
Absolutely, Greg.
Brilliant. Thank you for your time.